My imagination, where the songs are passionate.
For sure. Well, it's great to meet you. I'm looking forward to getting into the new album, your life and music. So thank you for taking a minute out.
Yeah, and thank you for having me and having me represent the band. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into the album, we're on the 5 year anniversary of this pandemic. We're about a month into it, and it really rearranged everything for everyone, but especially the musicians in the world in jazz. How much of living through that has reverberated into what you do today, and even an effect on this album?
Yeah, it's actually funny you say that. We recorded this EP in 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. And the game plan was, let's showcase our repertoire, our love for classic jazz, show what we can do, and let's get out there and hit the music festivals and things like that. And then the pandemic came and sort of derailed everything. Of course, it was hard for the music community through the pandemic, as no live events and people were adapting to Zoom, all this. For me, I think it sort of changed. I went into a different mind space because I went into public health advocacy actually,
Yeah.
because there was so much misinformation and I can't explain it. I think it was just sort of like a wartime mode, you just go into a different mode. And it actually took a few years to get out of it.
Yeah.
And so we actually came together as a band again in earnest in 2023. And then in 2024, we're finding our feet and we're like, let's get back to those recordings. So, and now, of course, we're building momentum and we're talking about making more music and things like that. But yeah, the pandemic was, for me and for the band, it was like a big kind of derailer. So sometimes I say, well, where would we have been if we hadn't been derailed? But you can't. I mean, it was just such a unique situation. So
Yeah,
that's a
it
ruthless
was.
kind of thing to think about. Yeah. Mhm.
I still remember on my side of the microphone getting a lot of albums right before the pandemic and interviews that I had with people where we still went through it. And it's funny because there's been a residual. I've talked to them since. So, because we literally interviewed in April and it was like, oh my God, I just put all this effort into this album. Everything stops, no live touring, none of that. But everything, one way or another, found a way to pick back up, get back to where it needed to be. So I'm curious, would you have changed anything about this process? I mean, or you have you embraced the idea that there was all of this change and all of these unmitigated forces that have contributed to not only this album but the promotion and your career?
Would I have changed anything? Well, the pandemic is what it is, and it came about, and we lived through it, and we are all changed, I think, forever by it. There's no two ways about it. I think for me, it revealed a new side of what what I could be and where my values lay and so forth. And I think that moving forward, you kind of in my case, I feel like I look at my audience differently and I think
Yes.
about my music differently. And I think that is going to bleed through into sort of the future music because it's now just this part of you that's not gone away. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is, yeah.
So into the Moonlight, let's get into it. Talk to me a little bit
Sure.
about kind of how you constructed the songs, how it came, how it feels that it's out and it's getting into eardrums.
Yeah. So in order to understand the repertoire on the EP, and three of them are sort of, beloved standards, and one is an original, you have to understand a bit about, the perspective it was made with. So I come with a very sort of international background, grew up in the Middle East, and then a few years in India, moved to Canada when I was in high school. And that's when I started sort of getting very interested in jazz. And so I still am very deeply, partly sort of westernized, if you will, but I'm very still, I've got very one foot and a lot of involvement in the Indian community. And I speak a lot of languages. So that comes into our repertoire. And when the Prismatics perform live, we have chanson, we have, bossa nova in Portuguese. We actually do some Bollywood swing. And so we wanted to showcase a bit of that, right? And say if we did a bunch of straight up Sinatra numbers, that's not us, right? So we're like, okay, but we got to keep it kind of accessible. So we picked Brazil, which is one of my all-time favorite songs, classic jazz standard, La Vie en Rose, which was French, and we do it in French and English. Then we did a Disney swing. Everybody wants to be a cat because it was kind of very interesting changes, especially with that sultry interlude in between. And I find that for an audience that is not as familiar with jazz, that bridge of pop culture makes the music more accessible. I mean, like I didn't grow up in a house where people were like playing Miles Davis and, and Mingus and stuff. So I sort of fell into it and it's kind of alien to a lot of my circle. And so I want to show the beauty of jazz and kind of bridge that. So we picked a pop culture tune. And then there's Into the Moonlight, which is a sort of melancholy, moody ballad. And I think in part reflects, my inclinations in music. So I love one of the things I love about jazz is that I think we do moody stuff really well,
Yeah.
like Thelonious Monk's Round Midnight and stuff like that, right? Chet Baker and some of Billie Holiday's kind of mournful melodies. And so I think Into the Moonlight is more in the vein of that. It's like a midnight melody. It's supposed to be very evocative of sort of atmosphere and loneliness. Yeah, but we try to keep a positive message through it all as well. Yeah, so that's kind of it was the idea of packaging these four together was to showcase this kind of what we like to call cosmopolitan music. I'm hoping that we will build on this repertoire moving forward to really kind of let some of that shine a bit more. Mhm.
So let's get into your journey. How did music and more specifically jazz become your world?
Music has always been there. So, growing up, I was in a circle that was completely Bollywood centered. That's my family's music, right? So very steeped in that, love that music. We used to have a lot of parties at home, and I'd play the keyboard and learn to play by ear. And so always been doing music and choir and Broadway, all that stuff. And then in high school, I got introduced to jazz via classical music. I used to listen to Classical 96, and they had some jazz on there, like the lunch and date show. And I loved it. I loved the music, the sound of the era, the 1930s to 1960s, what we think of with Ella, Billie Holiday, Sarah Vaughan, that kind of classic sound, big band music. I'm a swing dancer, so I, do the Lindy Hop in Charleston. And I was very lucky as an adult. At some point, I said, well, let's do something about it. And like I said, Toronto has a great jazz scene, and in particular, a very strong trad jazz scene. And so I started going in there and sort of sitting in with bands and meeting people. And that's kind of how I met, the band members. And so we started sort of saying, well, let's go out there and what kind of music would it be? So, yeah.
What
Mhm.
was the first live jazz show you saw that blew you away?
Oh, the first live jazz show. Now, growing up, I've never, um, I think it would be at Michigan State. And I did a co-op term there when I was in college. And the jazz band at Michigan State is very strong. This is in the early 2000s. And it was just in a coffee shop, not really a coffee shop, like a coffee shop board game kind of place,
Yeah.
like a student hangout place, right? And I had a buddy there who was the bass player, and he told me to come out and just listen to it. And it was like a trio. And I just love the seeing the tradition live with the melodies, some of which I knew, some of which I didn't, but mixed in with the improv and the solo. Yeah. So,
So why do you what gets you up every day? Why do you love to create music? Why do you love to be in this jazz community?
um, why do I, that's yeah, it's I know what it is, but it's hard to articulate. First of all, it feels amazing to be fronting a jazz band, especially when you have the kind of, top-notch musicians we have in our band. It's like you count in and the sound is like sound of this music you love, right? And it's such a joy and gift, I feel, to be able to sing these melodies and harmonies. Um, and then I love, we're able to do the kind of thing that Ella does, where she'll sing a song through straight once, and then she'll do variations on it. And it's a fun challenge and it's a bit of a roller coaster ride because, with improvisation, you don't know what the melodies are going to be like that come out, right? And you practice a bit, but you never know what's going to happen live. And I love that component of it. Sometimes you're doing things that you didn't even think about. So yeah, that's the other side of it. But it's just the sound. The sound is just amazing. The harmonies are wonderful. Yes, that's what I like about it.
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to the live music element. If you could go back in time in a time machine and see one jazz show, one person, where are you going to go? Or one group?
Yeah, I think I would definitely want to go see Ella perform live. I would want to see Ella Fitzgerald perform live and do her amazing scat vocals, and just see her own the space. And I'd love to see her sort of borrow melodies from other tunes and build them into a particular thing. Another person I would love to see live is Mel Torme. So those two
Mm,
are kind of very similar
yeah.
and in the way they own musical space and they sort of come up with these musical ideas vocally. So I'd say, one of those two. I would pick, if you were to ask me to pick a particular night, I mean, obviously there's the iconic Mac the Knife night in Berlin, right? But I'm not sure. I'm probably just picking that because it's coming to mind as the night. But I'm sure any sort of live show with these two, and you'd you'd be blown away by the way they own the musical space vocally.
So weird you mentioned that. My show engineer has a show called The Neon Beat. His name's John Christopher, one of my best friends. And we were talking about something during the recording of one of my shows, and he was like, do you remember the Mac the Knife show where she stopped and then kept going? Like she just went like nothing happened, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
it's just, I mean, I would love to get there, So sometimes I'm practicing, but it's one of those things, she's like pulling together rhymes out of thin
yep.
air, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's a bit like, the freestyling rap artist, right? So a little bit of a digression here. Recently, I was watching this video where Eminem talks to Anderson Cooper, and he's talking about how he's got this box of sheets of notes and rhymes and sort of rhythmic ideas, and he just writes and writes. So the words are like spinning in his mind all the time. And so, similar to like practicing your improvisational melodies, licks, and whatnot, you develop a facility so that when suddenly you are in that situation, you are pulling from this sort of association network you've built in your mind, if you will. Yeah.
See, I'd love to see her the first time she was on the stage at the Apollo when it all began.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, coming
Yeah.
out shy to that group of vultures and then just watching their hearts melt because this girl just totally blows him away. That'd be wild.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how old her Tisket a Tasket recording is, but that's another one
Yeah.
where there's just, she just hits all those arpeggios so cleanly. And then she's like, yeah, I don't know. I could go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I get it. So let me ask you this. Everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, fans, everyone in the band, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, who do I think I am? Um, so I have done enough creative things to know that you get very surprised by your creative process and what comes through. So I think of myself as being on a path and having some ideas about what I want to make, but and knowing that some of my influences, like I've discussed, the cosmopolitan stuff, is going to bleed in. So it's going to be influenced by different sort of cultural influences, but it's like you're on a path and you light up a little bit. So you're like a person walking on a path and you light a little bit with the flashlight you've got, but then when you're walking, you can only see so much. And in the end, you might end up somewhere else than what you thought. So I think of myself as a bit of this where I'm exploring and I kind of know the direction I'm going in, but I'm also ready to be surprised by the creative process and what comes out. So I've learned to expect that you just kind of let things happen uh, and then you just kind of, I don't know, there was somebody who said you just kind of, it's there, you just have to reveal it. I sort of feel like the person who's trying to do that. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to pick up a copy of the EP, catch you all live, any of the good business, where do they go?
Okay, so I'm on social media, Shraddha Pai Music. Yeah, I know my dad loves the complicated Indian names. I have to spell it every single time. But it's Shraddha Pai Music, ShraddhaPai Music. And, Instagram, Facebook, and the website, shraddhapaimusic.com. There's a newsletter there. So you can sign up for the newsletter, and that's probably the best bet to get sort of email updates on there. The band's music and my music is also on Spotify and SoundCloud. So we try to be everywhere, and we're on YouTube. So there you go.
Excellent. And I will put links in the show notes. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking a minute out to talk about the music, your career, and best of luck with the release.
Great. Thanks so much. Thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jazz fans, Joe Domino here, the host of the weekly Neon Jazz radio show and regular interview series being produced and distributed from Lee Summit, Missouri. We are very excited to let you know about the second annual Lee Summit Jazz Festival taking place again this summer on June 28th at the Bridge Space, located at 210 Southwest Market Street in downtown Lee Summit. Following the success of the 2024 festival, the lineup will include Lee Summit students, Casey Area Youth Jazz, Paganova with Michael Pagan, Horoscope with Stan Kessler, Brad Gregory, Adam Larson, and the Lee Summit Jazz Orchestra. There will also be food trucks and vendors to round out a day of celebration. Early bird tickets are 2 for $30, and all details can be found at lsjazzfest.com. We can't wait to see you there.